Hello and welcome to this video where we're going to take a look at the content which is included with Cubase 10. So in nearly every major update of Cubase recently there has been a significant amount of extra content. That's the case with this release. So there are 6 new libraries. So these contents which come as VST sound, so they're large, in some cases like 3 gigabytes large audio files, these VST sounds which have samples and MIDI and effects, etc. in them. So in the case of these, we're mostly looking at loops and samples. So there's a couple of ways you can browse them. You can either do them in the write zone here. So at the moment, we're looking at this. So we can go to loops and samples, and then we can see all of them included with their jolly little icons. So these are all the ones which are from this and previous versions of Cubase. So Analog Techno, for instance, is one of them. So by clicking on that, then you can use filtering here. But I generally find that doing it in the right zone, unless I know exactly the thing I'm after, I find that it's not the greatest way to go through there because the user interface is a bit clunky. Well, not clunky. It's just a bit too packed in there. So just going to close that up and then instead use Media Bay. So in Media Bay, we can see all those VST sound files which are in there, and then we see what's actually in them, and the organisation is much easier to go through. So I'm going to take a look through each one, just have a browse through, because I think the problem with some of this is you don't really know what's there, and you read the descriptions, and obviously it's a bit like reading people's descriptions that they put on Beatport of their track, where they just swallow a dictionary and it's all a bit meaningless. So I think it's much better to just have a listen through. So what I'm going to do is just play through some of these so you can get an idea, because I think with each one of them you quickly get an idea of what they are, and then I will make a track with each one and just put links to that for an MP3 just to download so you get an idea. I will then do a track for each one which we will just put on as a video I would then do a track for each one and put that up as a song separately, so you just get an idea of what's there. So obviously each song will just include the audio from each sound pack that you've got there. Right, so first one, Analog Techno. So this has got a whole lot of interesting atmospheric as the tone. I mean, often those things aren't always great descriptions, but there's some really good atmospheric kind of futuristic. Get the idea through there. Background noise loops. Bass loops. I'll be honest, these kind of things, I always find them a little bit frustrating, because often you think, oh yeah, that's great, but then I want to change this or that, and while you can do it by manipulating the samples, etc., often it can be a little bit frustrating because it's not as immediate as a synth, but then you wouldn't have access to. There's no way for them to download whatever piece of analog equipment that actually was, so I should stop moaning. As you can hear, there's lots of different ideas, and they've been in cases on this, been developed, filter changes, etc. So there is some variation in there that you can play around with. Beat loops, a load of them, 45 of those. Chord loops. So, just working with this, you can imagine there's a fair bit you could create fairly quickly, and it will sound interesting sonically because of the samples that you're using. Effects loops. Kick drum loops. Obviously, there's a huge amount of variation just in a 4 on the floor kick loop, let alone if there's a bit of rhythm, which I think we've got. There we go. Etc. Pad loops. Percussive sounds rather than actually percussive, or percussion instruments rather. And in this particular case, there's not just loops, there's also some one-shots, so we've got things that you can obviously drop into a sampler track, etc. And then use those, manipulate those, etc. So it's always funny because whenever somebody says, "Oh yeah, you know, more hi-hat sounds or more bass drum sounds," you think, "Oh really?" And then you listen to it and you think, "Oh yeah, I quite like that one." So there's so much variation available, even if you've already got thousands of things, and these are included with it, obviously. So huge variation in there, percussion sounds. Not quite sure I would describe them as stabs, but that's a bit more like it. But there you go. So that's the analog techno library. Now next, Blockbuster. So this is by Alan Morgan, and this is got quite a lot of things which are intended for, you know, game sound design and movie sound design as well. So it's quite atmospheric, as are a number of these. So quite a lot of them sound like hybrid to me, so that's never going to be a bad thing. So you can see there's 99 in there. They stop short of the magic 100, but there's loads of these. Now, again, the thing I find with these is you really need to listen through to all of them, because all of them are going to mean different things to different people, and it's the kind of thing that if you spend, you know, invest a couple of hours listening to all of these, and you remember some of them or think, oh yeah, that one's great, you know, that one's not, etc. Then later on, when you're creating something, whether it's, you know, personal or for a client or whatever, and you can refer to these. So in the same way, when you buy a new synth, it's not just having the synth, it's learning all the presets that come with it as well as the controls, and being able to sort of recall those quickly. That means you can quickly create something that fits the ideas that you've got in your head, rather than getting distracted with the technical side of things. So I think this is an important thing to mean that your creativity doesn't get broken up because you've done the sort of technical research at a different time. Sermon over. So there's guitar loops, ambient and heavy. So we've got, again, these appeal to me quite a lot as a guitarist. You know, if you're not a guitarist, then obviously having access to some nice guitar sounds, we've got some sonic interest, and you can hear, like on this one, the tremolo's getting stronger as it, in fact you can see it's getting stronger as we go. So there's a load of those to play around with. And then heavy, there's definitely some heavy stuff. So lots of you know, heavy guitar riffs to go from there. We've got some one shots. though I'm not sure a 1 minute 30. I guess it depends how you describe it, but you tend to think of a one shot as being a fairly short sample, but obviously these are, you know, and there's lots of these atmospheric kind of things, so if you're creating film music or creating some kind of soundscape, these are ideal, even if they just inspire you to make something that sounds similar. But there's lots of these where you can imagine, you know, being stuck on a certain level on a game and then you're about to get eaten by an alien. Guitars, so again some ambient guitar sounds, all sorts of different things, and these are the kind of things it would be nice to just lay up across an entire sampler keyboard and then spend some time improvising with. Yeah, some nice atmospheric hits in here. And then tonal hits, so and finally in Blockbuster, synth loops, so you can see we've got quite a few in here as well. Quite a lot of these remind me of Arnold Schwarzenegger films, you know, you can imagine The Running Man or whatever being remade. But yeah, there's again a significant amount of time to be spent in here with Vangelis, as it turns out. So yeah, that's Blockbuster. So great for game, you know, and film, etc. Design to add atmosphere as well as music, you know, the kind of things that Hybrid, etc. produce, so that atmospheric, very expansive feel is represented there. Now, Hip Hop Vault. Now, I will definitely not claim to be any kind of an expert on hip hop. I will now demonstrate that, my inability to know that as a 47-year-old person from the south of England. But anyway, we'll have a listen through to this, because I'm sure there's most people watching this will be far more knowledgeable and experienced than I am, but we'll just have a listen through anyway. So we've got classified as 80s, 90s hip hop, boom bap, hip hop, just back to straight hip hop, I guess. But yeah, there's some nice, sounding like they're sampled from a record, kind of drum breaks, etc. in here. Got that great and slightly mistimed feel to them, which is nice. So we've got loads to go through here, including trap. Who knew? UK Afro. And West Coast hip hop. So, you know, quite a few different genres, although obviously I think pigeonholing things isn't necessarily great, so you can use them for whatever. Then we've got some music loops in here. So again, you can see there's a lot of them in here, and they're again classified under similar things. So while that may be, you know, usable for 90s hip hop, you also think there's plenty of other styles which that will fit. And again, they're all, the production on them, they all sound like they've been found on a bit of vinyl that was only produced in, you know, on white label or whatever, and no one's ever heard before. So you can add some real authenticity to it, ironically, by using these. yeah, so there are a significant number of them in this particular folder. So loads of stuff to listen through. So I think it may be unfair to pigeonhole some of them. But pigeonholed they are. And then a whole load of one-shots, including the interestingly named Horror Chord. Obligatory 808 sounds, etc. So some of these are fairly, standard, but a lot of them will be much more interesting like that. So there you go. That's a quick trip through Hip Hop Vault. Now next is Raw Ambience. So this is quite a big one, if I remember rightly. So this has got a whole load of folders. Again, some real interesting, unusual, atmospheric sounds in here. Kind of things, again, it's nice to lay up on a sampler keyboard and then just play percussion using those to add some atmosphere to a production. Get the idea with that. Drones. Again, similar sort of feel to the both Blockbuster and Analog Techno. So this is adding a lot of that kind of atmospheric arsenal to your toolkit. And drum loops. So we've got electronica drum loops. And as you can see there, there's actually 99 of them there. So and then downbeat. So again, let's start at the top. Malfunctions, these are quite interesting, I think, for a certain thing. So you've got these kind of electronic glitchy sounds, which may well have been when, things went wrong or wires weren't correctly shielded and so on. So adding atmosphere. Some melodic loops. Slightly out of tune cello. Some interesting atmospheric pianos. Some, glitches, etc. in there. You see, there really is loads of stuff to go through, because you can just skip over one and have missed something that you find fantastic. So obviously we do not have the time to do that, but you can get a general idea of what's going on in here. But music textures, so a few of these. Reminiscent of a couple of games I played, I'm sure, but there we go, I guess that's the idea. So these tend to be longer. Entire pieces in themselves. And when listening to these kind of things, I do wonder how often they just get used in their entirety and somebody just goes, there we go, you can use this. And I believe under the licensing you're totally free to do that, so providing you don't obviously resell these as a sample pack or something like that, but you can use them in your productions. So you can see these are all long and atmospheric, and these great textural areas. So there's probably a game's worth of textures just in there. Outtakes, so there's some bits and pieces of things which are a bit hit and miss here and there. And then some sound effects, atmospheres, glitchy sounds. Things you can never get enough of in music production, impacts and so on. And then fairly good, you know, lifter, uplifter sounds, etc., those kind of things. Some more soundscapes. So these tend to be fairly long. So much like the music textures, and there's a lot of them. I'm pretty sure that this is the one that's about 3 gigabytes to install, whereas most of them are much smaller than this. So, and you can see why, with lots of, you know, long pieces in there. And finally, some sort of vocal soundscapes in there. So we get the idea there. So the raw ambience one, it's quite a big one, and there's a lot to go through. But this and the analog techno and Blockbuster are all of that sort of atmospheric sound production, sort of game sound design, etc., which I think sounds pretty cool. Right, Soul Assembly. So this one, a little more straightforward. So we've got drum loops of a fairly wide range of styles here. So as you can see from the names which are given, and as we'll see in a bit, or you know, hopefully you know already, we can search via these. So if we just went up to VST Sound and searched through, and we're looking for, you know, alternative indie, these would come up. So along with everything else in here which has been marked like that. So all the metadata that comes with this, so all the information that Steinberg have programmed about these sounds, so in terms of what key they are, the character, the style, and so on, that makes searching much easier. So when you add your own samples to it, generally that won't happen, but these come with all that information attached to each sample, so we know that if you're looking for an alternative drum loop, then these will come up. Not just because of the name, but because that's actually been marked as a tag on there. So yeah, this is a more general purpose, wide ranging one, because you can see there's all sorts of different styles. Occasionally they're just, you know, represented by one style. But it's covering many of the bases here. Pretty much the same for the music loops as well. So they have something that sounds like something off It Bites' second album, interestingly, there. Yeah, a whole load of things to go through. And again, I think this is one of those ones where definitely you would need to have a listen through to everything, because it is so diverse that if you skip over one, you may have missed something that's exactly the thing you'll be looking for, you know, later on, etc., or ideal inspiration for what you're doing. So I will then exactly do that and skip over them, but you get the idea here. So there's a real wide range of drum and music loops in this. So all much more straightforward in terms of their production. These are much more sort of general purpose, workman-like, covering all the bases parts, which is pretty good, because say there's such a wide range in here. And then the one shots, so they've got all the drum sounds, etc., which have been no doubt used in there, and then tonal one shots, so some sounds to play around with. So that's Soul Assembly, say a much more general purpose, covering all the bases kind of sound library. Now, Mystic Spaces. So again, this is made with a producer. I don't want to mispronounce his name because I've missed out the umlaut, but it's Ferdinand Furch, I believe. Self-made musical instruments. So he's made instruments and then recorded them, obviously, in an interesting way. So again, heading more into the unusual sound design, and as it says there, definitely experimental. The bow harp. So yeah, there's some, you can hear already, there's some interesting sounds in there. It'd probably be worth researching what these instruments actually look like. So I think these are much more useful if you wanted to create the kind of things that we've seen in Blockbuster and Analog Techno and Raw Ambience. These are exactly the kind of sounds that you can use to sample and then use those in a sampler and play around with them by adding effects and processing and production to them. So these are more building blocks for those other kind of things. So if you want a bit more control or to experiment yourself, which obviously is always a great idea to try and emulate what other people have done, these are a good starting point, because then you're not starting off with a really boring, mundane sound. You've got something that's already interesting, but then by playing around with it, you can get something much more interesting than if you just started off with a fairly generic sound in the first place. Yeah, so that's much more scary than the horror chord we heard earlier on. Now I feel like I'm going to be murdered. You know, and there's some ideas for unusual song starters, etc. in here. Some great atmospheric sounds in here as well. Singing metal. And finally, the string thing. So that's a look through the new content which comes with Cubase 10. So as we've seen, we've got Analog Techno, Blockbuster and Raw Ambience, which were very much on the game and sound design kind of tip, really adding some atmosphere. The hip hop vault, obviously intended for hip hop, but I think there's probably a lot of stuff in there you could use in loads of other genres as well. Soul Assembly, which really covers all the bases and provides you with good building blocks for all sorts of styles. And then finally Mystic Spaces with those self-made musical instruments and the sounds of those, which were great for creating your own atmospheric sounds and, as it says on the screen, experimental pieces of music. So rather than just reading a description on Steinberg's site, hopefully that's been instructive to you. And providing I get time, I may or may not, I will put together a piece of music using only the samples from each one and put these up as well. So that hopefully will be a bit of bonus content, so you can get more of an idea of what you can do with them if you just stick to solely using these elements of content, which are all provided with Cubase 10. So thanks for watching. Bye. If you've enjoyed this video, please like it and subscribe to the channel. Also, check out my book, The Complete Guide to Music Technology Using Cubase 10. It provides you with a thorough grounding in all aspects of using Cubase, music technology, and music theory. Follow the link for more information and to order a copy today. Thanks for watching.